Egypt's story begins before the pyramids, when the Sahara still held grass and lakes. As the climate dried around 6000 BC, people left the desert and settled along the Nile. They built small farming villages, growing crops and raising animals. In the north, the Merimde culture flourished in the delta. In the south, the Badarian culture rose in Upper Egypt. Both made pottery, farmed, and traded with neighbors. By 3200 BC, these villages had grown into regional kingdoms. Local rulers, the proto-pharaohs, claimed power in Upper and Lower Egypt. Each land had its own crown and its own identity. And around 3100 BC, unification began. The Narmer palette, which was carved around 3100 BC, shows King Narmer striking enemies. On one side, he wears the white crown of Upper Egypt, and on the other side, he wears the red crown of Lower Egypt. It is both a piece of art and an early example of royal propaganda. Later stories name a king called Menes, but archaeology points to Narmer. Most scholars, however, think Narmer and Menes were probably the same person. Also, unification was not a single event, for it was a slow process, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent. The timeline, nevertheless, varies from about 3150 BC to 2680 BC. So the birth of pharaonic Egypt is part history, part myth. Evidence is limited, and much remains uncertain. But by 3000 BC, Egypt was one state under divine kings, and its capital stood near Memphis, and its story was only beginning. The Old Kingdom is called the Age of Pyramids. Kings were seen as living gods. They upheld Maat, the order of the world, and showed their power through building. Pharaohs of the 3rd to 6th dynasties left pyramids, tombs, and inscriptions. At Saqqara, King Djoser built the Step Pyramid around 2670 BC. His architect, Imhotep, stacked 6 mastabas to create the first large stone monument. It rose 62 meters into the air. The 4th dynasty took the idea further at Giza. King Sneferu tested designs, including the bent pyramid. His son Khufu built the Great Pyramid around 2560 BC. It stood 146 meters tall and stayed the tallest building on Earth for thousands of years. These projects used tens of thousands of seasonal workers, not slaves. Inside, early pyramid texts recorded royal hopes for the afterlife, and for 5 centuries, Egypt was stable. A centralized bureaucracy kept things running. Viziers and officials collected grain taxes, managed irrigation, and organized labor. Their tombs record their names and duties. Noble tombs show painted scenes of fishing, farming, and feasting. Royal decrees repeat the pharaoh's divine role. But by the late 6th dynasty, around 2200 BC, decline had begun. Pepi II ruled for an unusually long time, and royal control weakened. Regional governors called nomarchs grew stronger. At the same time, droughts strained the land. Climate records show the Nile was lower and the region was drier. Texts like the Admonitions of Ipuwer describe famine, chaos, and even ruined pyramids. For a while, scholars thought these stories were literal, but archaeology shows no mass graves or burn layers. The collapse was gradual, not sudden. Power went to local lords who handled their own crises. Some towns, like Edfu, even grew. Later writers exaggerated the chaos. The truth was fading central power and growing fragmentation, and this set the stage for Egypt's reunification in the Middle Kingdom. When the Old Kingdom ended, Egypt broke into smaller centers of power. It was not total anarchy, but it was a political dark age. Records are scarce, though tombs and later accounts give some clues. Around 2180 BC, Memphis lost control. Local governors, who were also called nomarchs, ruled like kings in their own towns. Some built small pyramids or carved grand tombs to prove it. Two dynasties soon faced off, one in Heracleopolis and one in Thebes. Life was hard, likely due to low Nile floods. But people adapted. A governor named Anktifi bragged about how he kept his people fed. "No one hungered in my time," he said, which may or may not be true. Later, scribes in the Middle Kingdom painted the past as pure chaos. The Ampua papyrus claimed the rich wore rags, and that servants rose up, and that even pyramids were defiled. But this was more lesson and propaganda than eyewitness memory. Archaeology shows no mass civil war. Egyptian culture stayed strong, and kingship stayed the ideal. In the 21st century BC, Theban princes named Intef fought the north, and by 2055 BC, Mentuhotep II of Thebes won and reunited the land. He took the double crown, like Narmer before him. This victory ended the first intermediate period and began the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom was a return to strong central rule, but with a more human face. After Mentuhotep II reunited Egypt from Thebes, he built his mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. His 11th dynasty gave way to the 12th, which was founded by Amenemhat I, who was likely a usurper. He moved the capital to Itjitawi, near the Fayum. Kings placed loyal officials over the nomes and tied nomarch families into the system. Prosperity followed with expanded farming, reopened trade, and flourishing arts. Inscriptions, king lists, and literature record this age in detail. Pharaohs like Senusret III campaigned in Nubia, building forts such as Buin to guard gold and trade. They also dealt with Syria, Palestine, and maybe Crete. Big projects like draining the Fayum reshaped the land. This period produced lasting stories like Shipwrecked Sailor, Eloquent Peasant, and Sinuhe. We also find instructions linked to Amenemhat I, written after his assassination attempt. These texts, which were scratched on papyri and walls, reflect a lively scribal culture among elites. This period also saw the afterlife change. Once, only kings had spells carved in pyramids. But now, nobles painted coffin texts with guidance for the soul. Scholars call this the democratization of the afterlife. Furthermore, the cult of Osiris grew. It mixed faith with practical hope. But alas, the Middle Kingdom ended in decline. And by the late 13th dynasty, short-lived rulers weakened the throne. At around 1650 BC, Egypt split again, with outsiders moving into the delta. Egypt's second age of disunity brought foreign rulers to the throne. The Hyksos, a Semitic group from the Levant, settled in the delta. We talked about them in one of our older episodes. It's worth a watch if you haven't seen it already. But anyways, at Avaris, archaeology shows Canaanite families living there for generations. They came as traders and mercenaries, and from these, one group founded the 15th dynasty. Their rise was slow and gradual. It wasn't a single invasion. The Hyksos copied Egyptian customs. They took pharaonic titles, kept the bureaucracy, and worshipped Egyptian gods. They especially favored Seth, the storm god. They left very few inscriptions of their own. Later writers like Manetho painted them as ruthless conquerors, which he was most likely exaggerating. Their lasting mark, nonetheless, was technology such as the chariot, the composite bow, stronger bronze weapons, and new fortifications. These changed how Egyptians fought wars. Meanwhile, in Thebes, the 17th dynasty resisted. One story says King Apophis complained Theban hippos kept him awake. It was a joke, but Seqenenre Tao's mummy shows real battle wounds. Theban kings Seqenenre, Kamose, and Amose pushed north in war. Kamose even had his victories carved on a stele, boasting of driving out the Asiatics. Then, at around 1550 BC, Ahmose I captured Avaris, chased the Hyksos into Canaan, and reunified Egypt. This began the 18th dynasty and the New Kingdom. Modern digs by Manfred Bitak add nuance. Apparently, the Hyksos linked Egypt to the Near East, whereby they brought crops, instruments, gods, and new tactics. But again, Egyptian memory branded them usurpers who upset Maat, the cosmic order. But the evidence shows their rule was stable, if not welcome. And so, our record is mixed. Many ruins and artifacts, but few words left behind. They were probably erased by later Egyptian pharaohs once they reclaimed the rulership of Egypt. The New Kingdom was Egypt's golden age, lasting several centuries. After driving out the Hyksos, the 18th dynasty pharaohs rebuilt, expanded, and grew rich. Temples, tombs, papyri, and foreign records make this one of the best-known periods. Famous rulers include Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and Ramesses II. Ahmose I and Amenhotep I restored order and retook Nubia's gold and Sinai's mines. Thutmose III, ruling from 1479 to 1425 BC, became Egypt's empire builder. He led 17 campaigns, including Megiddo in 1457 BC, the first battle with tactics recorded. His victories expanded Egypt's empire from Nubia to Syria. Tribute of gold, cattle, and captives paid for temples and monuments. Egypt now stood with powers like the Hittites and Babylon. The Amarna letters show this world of diplomacy and trade. Pharaohs sent gold, demanded princesses, and scolded vassals like cranky pen pals. And then there was Hatshepsut, who was stepmother and regent of Thutmose III. She ruled from 1473 to 1458 BC. She claimed full pharaonic power, even dressing in male regalia. Her reign was peaceful and prosperous, as it was marked by a famous voyage to Punt. In that expedition, her ships returned with incense, ebony, and exotic animals. Scenes of this journey are carved at her temple at Deir el-Bahri. She also built obelisks at Karnak and patronized art. And after her death, Thutmose III erased some of her images. but her success still shows in her tomb and her monuments. Then, under Amenhotep III, from 1390 to 1352 BC, Egypt reached its peak of wealth and art. He styled himself as a sun god and raised hundreds of statues, including the Colossi of Memnon. He built a grand palace at Malkata. His son, Amenhotep IV, changed his name to Akhenaten and sparked a religious revolution. He raised Aten, the sun disk, above all other gods. He shut Amun's temples and built a new desert capital called Akhetaten. With his queen Nefertiti, he worshipped Aten in open-air temples. Art switched to soft curves and intimate family scenes. His hymns sound close to monotheism. O sole God beside whom there is none, you create the earth according to your desire, you alone. Yet Egypt had been polytheistic since its founding. Scholars still argue over Akhenaten's religion. Some see it as true monotheism, while others suggest it was worship of Aten with the king as the only priest. Later, however, Egyptians rejected Akhenaten's vision. And after his 17 years, Tutankhamun, who was first named Tutankhaten, brought back the old gods and Thebes. However, Tut died young, at around the age of 18. His tomb, found intact in 1922, made him famous. Historically, he mattered more for undoing Akhenaten's reforms, which were likely those of his father or grandfather. Nevertheless, Egypt regained strength under Horemheb. Then came the 19th dynasty, starting with Rameses I and Seti I. The greatest ruler was Rameses II, who reigned from 1279 to 1213 BC. He ruled for 66 years, and he filled Egypt with temples and left colossal statues everywhere. In 1274 BC, he fought the Hittites at Kadesh. His carvings and the poem of Pentor brag of victory with Amun's help. However, most agree that the battle was a draw. Then, about 15 years later, he and Hattusili III signed the first known peace treaty, which can be found in both Egypt and Anatolia. Rameses also built the Ramesseum, Abu Simbel, and added to Karnak and Luxor. He fathered many children and may have shaped later Exodus tales, though no proof exists. His city, Pi-Rameses, and his long life cemented his fame. He died in his 90s, leaving heirs like Meneptah, whose inscription names Israel for the first time. The last great pharaoh was Rameses III, who ruled from 1184 to 1153 BC. And in the Bronze Age collapse, Egypt was attacked by the Sea Peoples. They came from the Aegean or Anatolia and had destroyed other kingdoms. We spoke of this interesting encounter in one of our older episodes, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Anyhow, Rameses met them in year 5 on land and in year 8 at sea. The naval battle in the Nile Delta, shown at Medinet Habu, was decisive. Egypt survived but was left weaker. Rameses III later fell to a palace plot, and his throat was cut in a Horem conspiracy. After him, royal power died out. By the time of Rameses XI, priests of Amun controlled Thebes, while pharaohs ruled only the delta. And so, the new kingdom ended here. Its grand temples, Valley of the King's tombs, and detailed records make it the most visible age of Egypt. After Ramesses XI, Egypt's empire was gone. What followed were centuries of divided rule, with Libyan and Nubian pharaohs, brief revivals, and foreign invasions. The records are patchy, drawn from king lists, Assyrian annals, the Bible, and Herodotus. They are less complete than the sources of the New Kingdom. As mentioned earlier, in the Third Intermediate Period, from about 1069 to 715 BC, power split in two. Kings at Tanis ruled the Delta, while high priests of Amun ruled Thebes. The division was often peaceful, since both lines were family. Tombs at Tanis, found intact in the 1930s, showed these kings were still rich. Also, Libyans, many whom were once mercenaries, gained influence in this period. From 945 BC, Shoshenq I founded the 22nd dynasty. He was called Shishak in the Bible. He ruled from Bubastis, supporting Egyptian cults. But rival Libyan dynasties soon fractured power further. In the 8th century BC, Nubian kings from Kush claimed Egypt's throne. Paye conquered Egypt at around 728 BC, thereby founding the 25th dynasty. They restored temples and built pyramids in Nubia. Taharqa, their most famous king, appears in both the Bible and Assyrian records. Nevertheless, the Assyrians struck back, sacking Thebes in 667 BC. They left vassals behind, but soon withdrew. The 26th dynasty rose from this vacuum. Psamtik I drove out the Assyrians, reunited Egypt, and made Sais the capital. These Scythe kings hired Greek mercenaries and opened ports like Naucratis. They also revived older art styles and temple building. Necho II tried to cut a canal between the Nile and the Red Sea. His successors prospered, trading and allying with Greece. But in 525 BC, Cambyses of Persia invaded. Later legend says he used cats at Pelusium, but we'll probably talk about that in a future episode. For now, Egypt became a Persian province, and this was how the 27th dynasty was founded. There were short native restorations in dynasties 28 to 30. The last Egyptian king, Nectanebo II, built widely, but fell to Persia again. Then came Alexander the Great in 332 BC. He honored the gods, asked Amun's oracle for blessing, and was crowned pharaoh. He founded Alexandria, then died, leaving Egypt to Ptolemy. And through it all, Egyptian culture lived on. Libyans ruled as Egyptians. Nubians revived tradition. Persians copied local styles. By the time of the Ptolemies, foreign kings wearing Egyptian crowns had become normal. The last chapter of ancient Egypt was Greek. The Ptolemaic Dynasty, which, once again, was a Macedonian Greek dynasty that ruled for 3 centuries, ended with Cleopatra VII. They posed as true pharaohs, Greek-speaking rulers in Alexandria. In temples like Edfu and Dendera, they appear in hieroglyphs, crowned and offering to the gods. It imitated the style of the New Kingdom, which meant to keep priestly support. Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander's generals, founded the dynasty. He secured Egypt's wealth and power. His son, Ptolemy II, built the Library of Alexandria and supported scholarship. Society was split, however. Greeks held offices while Egyptians stayed in villages. And over time, the two cultures blended. Cleopatra VII was the first to learn Egyptian. She styled herself as Isis and appears at Dendera in traditional dress. Her reign unfolded as Rome grew stronger. She allied with Julius Caesar and had his son, Caesarion. After Caesar's death, she joined with Mark Antony to challenge Rome. However, Octavian's propaganda and his victory at Actium in 31 BC ended that dream. And in 30 BC, as Octavian closed in, Antony killed himself. Cleopatra followed, avoiding capture, perhaps by asp bite, though the truth is uncertain. Be sure to check out this special episode on Cleopatra and her love affairs on our channel if you haven't already. Nevertheless, with her death, Pharaonic rule ended, and Egypt became a Roman province. And so, Cleopatra's death marked the symbolic end of Egypt's 3,000-year Pharaonic age. From Narmer to Cleopatra, it was an uncommon run. And throughout all these periods, rulers switched from Egyptian to Persian, then Greek, then Roman. No more royal burials in the Valley of the Kings. No new hieroglyphic stelae. But temples like Philae stayed active until the 4th century AD. Roman emperors even posed as pharaohs in temple carvings. The culture remained as a thin surface. Pyramids gave way to rock tombs. Hieroglyphs faded into Coptic, and later Arabic. But continuity held in reverence for the Nile, divine kingship, distinctive art, and belief in the afterlife. Even late priests still copied Old Kingdom texts. Only Christianity finally broke the chain. Classical writers mourned the end. Plutarch said Cleopatra, by charm and persuasion, could hold and sway the balances of power. The Romans, the British, and even the Americans, they all carried obelisks to their capitals. The Romans even worshipped Isis and kept the mystique alive. Modern archaeology, from the Rosetta Stone onward, renewed that legacy. Cleopatra's death was a full stop, not an erasure. And today, Egypt's pyramids, mummies, and hieroglyphs remain symbols of antiquity and mystery.